I am excited to start an NFL redraft series. We are just about 6 weeks away from the 2026 NFL draft. So I thought now is a perfect time to redraft the last 6 NFL drafts. And so every week I'm going to be doing a new NFL redraft. They're going to drop every Wednesday all the way up until the day before the draft. I'll do a 2025 NFL redraft. So we're going to go backwards. We're going to start all the way in 2019. So today is a 2019 NFL redraft. If you want to see all of them up till 2025, they're going to come out on Wednesdays. Make sure to subscribe. But for today, let's start with 2019. And we're going to pull up the 2019 draft order. 2019 was an interesting draft now that we look back at it. Obviously, the big headline was Kyler Murray. He went first overall. Not really a great quarterback class. We'll talk more about Kyler in a second. Daniel Jones was selected. The late Dwayne Haskins was selected later in the first round as well. But overall, not a great quarterback class. The headline of this draft, I think, in real time and also now looking back, was the big guys, and especially those along the defensive line. The pass rushers, the guys inside, defensive tackles. There were some good offensive linemen as well, but really the highlight is the defensive line. And so that is pretty much the theme as we go through it, with a couple skill position players mixed in as well. But this is going to be a very defensive heavy draft. A couple rules before we get started. I am basing the draft order on who made the actual selection. So we're not going backwards if there was picks traded. It's just based on who selected the actual player. And so if you made a trade because a certain guy was available, obviously I'm not going back and changing that. It's just based on who picked in what spot. For the most part, I'm going to try to stick to the needs or the position that their team initially selected. So if you really needed an edge rusher, I'm going to try to fit in an edge rusher, either the one you selected or a better one. I'm not going to just go completely best player available. However, the board is heavily influenced by the best player. If you picked an edge rusher and there's far and away a better wide receiver, I'm going to give you the wide receiver. Because I think if we were doing a redraft, it would be weird. It's complicated. I'm not going to go too much into, is it based on now? Is it based on 2019? All of that. Teams would want the best player, regardless of position. But if it's sort of close, I'm going to go with what they selected or kind of a position of need at the time. And if it's really close and if I'm not really going to break a tie, I'm typically going to give the same player they selected. You could make the argument maybe it should be someone else. If it's close, tie goes to who they selected. Think of it as they know the player. So that's just kind of how I'm going to do these redrafts. So let's start with the first pick. Arizona picks Kyler first. I really wanted to make the case for him not to go number one again, because you look at his career and we're now, 7 seasons in. It hasn't been great, but it also hasn't been terrible. I wouldn't call him a bust as a number one pick. And I think if there was especially another quarterback in this draft that was worth taking over him, I would gladly accept that. And I debated a couple of the pass rushers after him being the number one pick, but the position value is just too much. So I have Kyler going back to Arizona with the first pick. Yes, you could argue based on how it turned out for Arizona, they wouldn't want to do that, but quarterbacks are just too valuable. And I think they still stick with him with the first pick. Second pick, I also have the same selection. I'm going to go Nick Bosa again at pick number 2 for San Francisco. You can make a really good case for my third player, and I'm going to jump to number 3. Jets picked Quinnen Williams. I have them going Max Crosby next, who actually wasn't picked until the 4th round initially. He jumps all the way up to number 3. Nick Bosa and Max Crosby is a good comparison. I think Nick Bosa's highs have been a little bit more. He's a former defensive player of the year. But the benefit of Max Crosby is he's played consistently throughout his 7 years. He's played consistently. He doesn't miss a snap. Pretty famously, the Raiders had to essentially kick him out these last couple games last year. Whereas Nick Bosa has now had a couple years where he's been injured. So you could make the case you want Max Crosby. Again, tie, I'm going to go with the 49ers sticking with Nick Bosa, but I think it's close, those two. Then I have a lot of interior defensive linemen, and the Raiders clearly aren't selecting Clelin Ferrell 4th. I have them going Jeffrey Simmons, and I'm going to follow up with the next two. I have the Buccaneers not going Devin White, still going defense. I have them selecting Quinnen Williams, and then the Giants getting a guy they drafted just a little bit later. I have them getting Dexter Lawrence at 6, not Daniel Jones. We'll talk Daniel Jones in a little bit, but these 3 I think are the best interior linemen in this draft class, and 3 of the better interior linemen in the league. As I said, I think this draft class is known for those guys in the interior, plus some edge guys. We talked about a couple of them. I prefer Jeffrey Simmons a little bit, then Quinn Williams, then Dexter Lawrence. I think the order you could probably mix and match. All three have been great for their respective teams. Quinn Williams has bounced around now a little bit, but three elite defensive linemen. And I think now the league is trending towards needing a really good guy inside. So all three of these guys are still really valuable and just three of the best pure football players in this draft. So I have them going in the top 6. 7, I have Josh Hines-Allen coming back to Jacksonville. I think he's been a good player, sort of a slow start to his career, but he's turned into one of the better kind of edge pass rushers in the league. I think Jacksonville is happy with still getting him at 7. 8 is where we get to some skill position players. And I don't have the Lions going TJ Hawkinson, although I think he's had a good career. I think they go somewhere else in the skill position group. And I have AJ Brown jumping up from 51 up to 8. However you feel about AJ Brown, he is one of the best wide receivers when he's right in the league. And I think the Lions could have used some wide receivers back then. Even now, him and Amon-Ra St. Brown would be a lot of fun together. I think they go him over TJ Hawkinson. Bills, I have them sticking with Ed Oliver. Similar to Josh Hines-Allen, he's been a really good player for them. I think they're content with him. You can make the argument for my number 10 selection. I have Zach Allen jumping up from 65 up to 10. Another really good kind of defensive end, kind of 5 technique guy. You can make the case you like him over Ed Oliver. But again, I think Buffalo, with the familiarity, I think goes Ed Oliver at 9. I have Zach Allen going 10 to Pittsburgh. Just seems like a perfect Steeler. Zach Allen just seems like a Steeler. Number 11, the Bengals. I don't have going Jonah Williams, but I'm going offensive line because the Bengals have needed that, seems like forever. I have Chris Lindstrom as my number 1 offensive lineman from this group. Not necessarily a tackle, but I think just the best offensive lineman. Cincinnati's happy with that at 11. Number 12, I think the Packers go edge rusher, but I don't have Rashawn Gary. I have Brian Burns moving up a few spots to number 12. I think he's just had a better career than Rashawn Gary up until this point. 13, another pass rusher. I have Montez Sweat jumping up into the first half of the first round. Christian Wilkins was talented, but had some issues, and now he's, I think, just out of football. So he's not going to be selected. Montez Sweat has had a good career. Both him and Brian Burns, good edge pass rushers. Can't go wrong with edge guys. 14, I did have Chris Lindstrom here. I do think the Falcons go offensive line again. I have Elton Jenkins going 14. He, I think, was just released as we're recording this from the Packers. It's been maybe a not as good last year or so for Elton Jenkins, but in the first few years of his career, I think he was the best offensive lineman in this group. So I think they're okay with him at 14. Maybe not as long of a career, and maybe he has a second half of his career that is better, but maybe not as long of his career as, say, Chris Lindstrom. That's why I have him getting the edge as the number 1 offensive lineman. But I think a really good offensive lineman for a few years. So I think Atlanta is kind of happy with that secondary choice. 15, Commanders went Dwayne Haskins. Unfortunately, I'm not going to pick Dwayne Haskins in this redraft. I'm also not going to pick another quarterback. Again, we will talk Daniel Jones in a little bit. He's coming. But I think the Commanders pivot to a skill position guy. I think the value at this point is just too much. They have him on the team right now, but they would have loved to have him in his prime. I have the Commanders going Deebo Samuel at 15. Gives them another weapon. They can look elsewhere for quarterback. But I think, again, value is too much. Deebo Samuel, in his prime, was one of the best all-around players in the league. 16, Panthers don't get to select Brian Burns. Could make the case another pass rusher, but I think the best ones are off the board at this point. So when we're talking value and we're talking a position of need that the Panthers have had, seems like for a while, up until this year, I have the Panthers going DK Metcalf, jumping up from 64 to 16. As I said, the Panthers, before they got Teterow and McMillan, have been searching for a number 1 receiver, it seems like, for a while. And DK Metcalf has his flaws, but at a minimum, he's a low-end number 1 receiver, probably better suited as a number 2, but an alpha receiver that Carolina has been missing. So I think the value is too much. Not enough good pass rushers that I think DK Metcalf slots in here. Now into the back half, number 17, Giants already got Dexter Lawrence. You can make the case that they could go Daniel Jones and just swap them, and probably value-wise, it would be better. but I have them passing. I have them going Terry McLaurin, kind of the third receiver in this little run. I think the best receiver left, and I think kind of ends the value for receivers, to me, didn't have the maybe ceiling that Deebo Samuel and DK had, but Terry McLaurin's been a very good receiver. And so he comes up from, I think, the third round he was selected, comes in at 17. Giants have needed a receiver also up until the last couple of years. So I think he fits in. Giants can go elsewhere at quarterback. And again, Daniel Jones is coming, I promise. 18, I have the Vikings taking Garrett Bradbury again. He's now bounced around. He was in New England. They now just traded him to Chicago, but a valuable and solid offensive lineman. And if you can get just a good offensive lineman, that's valuable. Maybe not as high of a peak as a Chris Lindstrom or an Elton Jenkins, but a good lineman, and I think Minnesota runs it back. Now we get to 19, and 19 was Jeffrey Simmons, one of the better values in the real draft. Tennessee doesn't get the chance to select him. I'm going to go Daniel Jones here at 19. Now, I do think he deserves to be in the first round. You could argue that, but I think in a pretty weak quarterback class, I think he's probably the second guy, and that's mainly because of, well, right now, 2 good years he's had. He had a really good year in New York, ended up getting him paid, and then a pretty good year this year in Indianapolis. So we know he can do it. This isn't like a quarterback that never really had a high ceiling. We've seen a good quarterback in there. Now we've seen probably 4 or 5 years of not good quarterback play, but the potential is there. And I think Tennessee, at this point in the draft, to get a quarterback that at a minimum could be a somewhat capable starter for you for 5-6 years, and the potential of being a Pro Bowl level quarterback, I think that is good value at 19. They don't get the best value of Jeffrey Simmons at 19, but I think they go Daniel Jones. This was like the Ryan Tannehill era in Tennessee. Ever since then, they kind of needed quarterbacks. They've now obviously landed with Cam Ward, but for that 5 or 6 years, they could have used somebody. I think Daniel Jones would be a nice fit in this redraft. Number 20, I have Denver going at tight end, but I have TJ Hawkinson slotting in here. Falls a little bit from 8 all the way down to 20, but he's been a good tight end. Got hurt. It's kind of been a down couple years, but a good tight end. I think he's clearly the number 1 tight end in this class over Noah Fant. So he still gets in the first round at number 20. Number 21, I have the Packers selecting Byron Murphy. I think one of the better cornerbacks in this class. No elite cornerbacks, and this is the first secondary guy that we get. But Packers could use some secondary help. They picked Darnell Savage. I have them going Byron Murphy in this redraft. Eagles, they picked Andre Dillard 22nd. This is one where I'm going to say they didn't really need an offensive lineman. They had Jordan Mailata kind of in the wings. Obviously, had Lane Johnson, still had Jason Kelsey, things like that. I'm going to go almost best player available for them, and I'm going to go Andrew Van Ginkel. Another one that I just love the fit in Philadelphia. Pass rusher, can be a little bit flexible, can drop back and play linebacker. One of the guys that has kind of grown over the years, I think probably right now is his best performance. So I think he's grown from, I mean, he was picked 151. So it took him a little bit, but now I think he's one of the better players in this class. So I think Philadelphia picks him. Another pass rusher to add to all their pass rushers they've had the last 5 or 6 years. Houston needs offensive linemen. They're not going Titus Howard. I have them going Juwan Taylor, who is pretty much most famously known for being on the Chiefs and all of the false start drama and stuff. All of that aside, he's been a solid right tackle for them. And I think Houston could use that. And I said it for Minnesota. A solid offensive lineman is valuable. They might not have the highs of some players, but they're valuable, and Houston just needs good offensive linemen. 24, I have the first running back going, and it is going to be Josh Jacobs. Again, Raiders get him with 24. I think they stick with it. You could make the case that the Raiders had so many other needs. They don't need a running back. But I would also argue that Josh Jacobs has been a really good running back. And you could make the case he should go higher. I think he maybe isn't an elite running back. I think elite running backs will go up higher. Good and really solid running backs like a Josh Jacobs probably slot in towards the end of this first round. And so the Raiders probably have needs elsewhere, but I think they're content with Josh Jacobs. Maybe they will keep him this time in this redraft, but I think they stay the same with Josh Jacobs. 25, Ravens took Marquise Brown. I don't think there's a good enough wide receiver that is on the board. You can make the case maybe for someone like a Hunter Renfrow, who in his prime was a really good receiver, but it only lasted a couple years. There's guys like Jacoby Myers, a couple other more role player receivers that you could take here. I don't think there's one worth taking. So I'm going to go, again, sort of best player available. I'm going to go Caleb McGarry, who went at the end of the first round, jumps up a few spots. Another good offensive lineman, a good right tackle in Atlanta. I think he slots in Baltimore. They selected Roger Rosengarten a few years later. They swap him out for another UW tackle. Another just solid piece. Baltimore could use some more offensive linemen. 26, Montez Sweat. He was already drafted. Washington can't pick him. I have the first undrafted guy going in the first round. And I have Azeez Al-Shaair formerly of the 49ers. He's now bounced around a little bit, but a really good off-ball linebacker and someone that could kind of slot in for Washington. It's always fun to see the undrafted guys, see who stands out. Couple guys that were probably worth mentioning, but Azeez Al-Shaair is definitely the best one of the group. So I think he gets all the way up into the first round in this redraft. Number 27, Raiders aren't going to go Jonathan Abraham. They are going to go on the defensive side of the ball. I have CJ Gardner-Johnson coming in at 27. Good safety, been on a couple different teams, and the Raiders just need defensive help. It seems like that's been the case for the last 5 years. CJ Gardner-Johnson has helped multiple teams on the defensive side. I think he comes in and helps the Raiders right away. Chargers picked Jerry Tillery initially. I have them going defense still, but another off-ball linebacker, Bobby Okereke, I have going 28. Seems like a Jim Harbaugh guy. And again, this is where redrafts are weird. Are we talking about the team now, or are we talking about the team in 2019? But I think Okereke has been a really good tackle machine, off-ball linebacker. I think him, Azeez Al-Shaair, one other guy that we're going to talk about, a pretty good off-ball linebacker group. No big stars, but solid contributors over their career. 29, Seahawks. I'm definitely not going LJ Collier, but I am going to go a guy that has now on their Super Bowl team, but they want to draft him earlier. I had them going Julian Love, who has been a real key to this new Seahawks defense. He was with the Giants initially. He was picked 4th round. He gets all the way up to the 1st round and kind of gets to start right away with Seattle. He's been a really good player for them. I think they would be really happy getting him at 29. 30, my last off-ball linebacker, I have Blake Cashman going to the Giants. They could use some secondary help, but I don't think the board really shows it. So I have Blake Cashman going here. Another really solid contributor. Another one that I think is probably playing his best football right now. Took him a little bit. I mean, he was picked in the 150s, but playing really good football right now. A really good off-ball linebacker. Giants could use a really good off-ball linebacker. Number 31, Caleb McGarry was the pick. He ended up going a few spots higher. Falcons, I think, just go best offensive lineman, and I have Dalton Reisner going 31. I'm going to keep saying it. Solid offensive linemen are worth taking, and I think Dalton Reisner has been a really good offensive lineman for his career. Falcons, I think, are okay taking him at 31. And then the final pick, 32, infamously, Patriots took N'Keal Harry here. Certainly aren't going to do that. And again, I don't think there's a wide receiver worth taking at this spot. So I'm going to go yet another offensive lineman, Eric McCoy. Saints drafted him in the 2nd round. He moves up a few spots. Good center, good guard, somebody who can slot in the interior offensive line and be helpful for New England. So plenty of offensive linemen that are solid. I think they go in this 1st round. That's all 32 picks. Again, a lot of the top is focused on defensive line, especially interior defensive line. Kyler Murray is going to be the interesting one. If you don't think at all he should be the number 1 pick again, let me know down in the comments. I think just due to the value of quarterbacks, I think he does. But after him, it's a bunch of really, really good defensive guys. I think overall, when you look at this group, and you can look at other guys that were drafted, some good names that didn't get drafted as well. It was an interesting overall draft class. I don't think we would look back and say this was an elite draft class. I think except for that defensive line group, pretty weak across the board. Wide receiver certainly helped by the Ole Miss guys. A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf are the big stars. Debo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, a couple other good wide receivers. Not a ton of good running backs outside of Josh Jacobs, and then not really a ton of good quarterbacks outside of Kyler, Daniel Jones, if you want to include him as well. So an interesting draft class, but a fun one because a lot of guys inside, a lot of offensive linemen to pick, a lot of defensive line. So it's not flashy, but it's a good draft. And I think a fun one to look back on. So that was the 2019 NFL Redraft. As I mentioned at the top, I'm going to be doing these every Wednesday. all up until the 2026 NFL draft. So next week, the 2020 NFL redraft, we'll get into it, but a lot more fun, a lot more flashy players in the 2020 draft. So if you want to see more, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and we will see you for the 2020 NFL redraft.